I'm curious for your perspective on how important infrastructure partners have been as part of Somnia's success and journey, and how you think about those folks insofar as I think there's system design, and we talked about performance and sort of the throughput. I think as you somebody from a technical standpoint, there's always the system design, and then there's what happens when the rubber meets the road. And so I'm just curious, in sort of with that as a backdrop, how do you think about infrastructure partners as part of like that sort of concoction of partners to bring Somnia to life?
Yeah, I think ultimately the infrastructure partners are the core of Somnia, in my view, at the end of the day. Without them, Somnia wouldn't exist. So Somnia is a blockchain. It is what we call sufficiently decentralized. So we're not trying to be as decentralized as like an Ethereum, where there's tens of thousands, where you can run basically an Ethereum node on like a toaster. It is a high performance chain, so it requires a high performance node, but it's not crazy. It's still consumer grade hardware. It's just like Solana or Sui kind of node is the way we kind of think about it. So for us, without the infrastructure partners to run that, it couldn't be a decentralized network and a blockchain at the end of the day. So they are the core of what we do. You guys in particular have done an incredible job at providing very high quality infrastructure in different places and geographies, which is also very important to us as well, because having that geodiversity increases the decentralization of the chain, which is good for its value proposition at the end of the day. So that's like the core thing that all of these infrastructure partners play. And we've selected so far what I would say like institutional grade infrastructure partners like yourself and lots of other people. They are very, very high quality. We do have a vision to kind of make that what we call semi-permissionless and eventually permissionless, so more people can bring in compute to the network, but there will always be strict performance requirements because ultimately Somnia is a high performance chain. That is its proposition. We can't sacrifice that performance at the end of the day. So that's the kind of core bit. I think the other bit that I've been really pleasantly surprised by the infrastructure partners is the other bits they add to the ecosystem. So for example, some people have developed software which now is used where you can view the network, you can see all the nodes, you can stake tokens, which is really cool. Some people have built on pull requests onto the core chain itself to look through the code, suggested suggestions and improvements, which is really cool. Some people like this, for instance, are helpful on the go-to-market side. So they will publish articles, they'll work with us at events and conferences, they'll do podcasts together. So I think what I've also come to realize is your infrastructure partners are helpful in terms of your technology development and your go-to-market development as well. So they're not just people that run nodes. If you work with good partners, they will help you do much more than that, which is awesome. And obviously reliability and scalability of the whole system at the end of the day. So yeah, very, very important in my view.
You talked about this, the metaverse theme in the Web3 space has had somewhat of a history. There have been several launched over the years. Very few, if any, have really broken out and emerged. Do you see that as an infrastructure problem that has now been solved to some extent, or do you view this as you and the Somnia team have had some unique insights as it relates to how you build and launch a metaverse that is unique and new and novel, and also some part of the story of the success thus far?
So I think there has been technology challenges, and I think the blockchain was one of those. But I think the other thing is innovative, interesting experiences on top. I think I don't want to talk badly of other products, but the failing has been the content on top in these metaverse experiences has not been compelling for consumers. And ultimately, you're vying for consumers' attention, and they have to have an experience that's interesting for them, they want to attend and want to be a part of. And so I think actually the biggest challenge has been the content creation side and cracking that rather than necessarily core infrastructure. But that is a tooling problem, and that does have a technology piece. Like a previous technology that we built at Improbable. So this is a technology we built, which is why we built the blockchain. So this is an event we did with Major League Baseball. This is around 7,600 baseball fans all attending a digital baseball match together. So they can all see each other. They can all have fully customized avatars. That's a very difficult challenge to overcome. They also have voice communications. These larger characters are telling the people where to go, what to do. Then they kind of have different events and experiences they do here, like mini games and things like that. They then all run into the experience, and then they go and watch a baseball match. So the really cool thing about this baseball match is it's a digital twin of the live baseball match. So we stream data from the baseball stadium into the cloud, turn that into 3D models in real time, and you get a one-to-one replica between the physical and the digital. So you as a consumer can go to the event and feel like you're there. So here you can see the side-by-side. where it's all synchronized together. So basically, as a consumer, you can go to this experience, feel like you're in a baseball stadium in a massive crowd, but ultimately you can be at home on your couch, on your way to work. All you need is an internet-connected device to be a part of this. So this experience is, in my opinion, very differentiated and very compelling. I think that's been the major challenge to actually have that innovation experiences, which has required tooling up the chain as well as the core blockchain itself. Because once you then have these experiences which can track the consumers, you need a blockchain that can handle tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of TPS, basically, because you get a lot of people all trying to transact at the same time. You need a very fast blockchain to solve that problem. Otherwise, the consumer experiences get degraded and it's not good at the end of the day. So that's my view. I think it's also a time thing. Web3 in general has incredibly short time horizons and cycles and expects things to happen like instantaneously. Things like this concept of the metaverse, video games, these things take time because you have to build up the content, the tooling, the user base. They're not instantaneous overnight hits. And so the other thing, I think Web3 doesn't really have the attention span for this kind of content as well. That's the other issue.
You're obviously a big fan of open standards, and you talked a little bit about where you see the vision longer term, especially in the infrastructure side. But when you think about Somnia specifically, how do you see governance and setting evolving, both in theory and in practice, as Somnia continues to evolve?
Oh, interesting question. I think my honest answer is I don't know the answer to this yet. But the vision for us is to progressively decentralize the governance of the system. And the way we think about it is thinking about the different counterparties in the system, what role they play, and how they should govern that piece. So, for instance, the validators, they need a very strong say in the technology roadmap when things get chosen to roll out, potentially some of the economics of the system. So they'll play a role in the governance of that. The end users will have a role in terms of allocation of funds to new content, those kind of elements. The developers will talk about the technology roadmap. So the way we think about it is kind of thinking about the different groups of people, what their kind of skin in the game is and what they care about in the ecosystem, and allowing them to participate in that part of the system and govern that part of the system. This is different to a lot of projects where they go for a DAO style model where one token equals one vote. I do think token holders should hold part of the governance, but one token, one vote, I think creates two problems. One, you get this odd plutocracy where the people with the most money have the control of the system rather than the people who are actually in the system, which I don't necessarily like. The other thing you get a lot of is apathy, where most of the population of token holders just don't vote and things get kind of voted in or controlled without necessarily a lot of people really contributing. So this is why our formation of governance is going to be much more around the different groups and them kind of governing the parts that they care about in the system, rather than just if you have a token, you can vote, and that's how the system works. But it will be a evolution. Like we will take this step by step. And this is why I don't really have a full answer today. I think the first elements of decentralization in terms of the governance we'll be doing is with the validators themselves, and then the user base allocating incentives across the ecosystem. And then we'll slowly kind of step by step this and increment it over time, rather than going, I think I've seen a lot of projects go from zero to DAO instantaneously. And then you get the issue of no one can make decisions, everything takes too long, and we're not at that phase yet. But it is important, I think, to have all these counterparties being part of the governance system, because that's important to decentralization, important to making sure this isn't all on one singular counterparty at the end of the day.
And Paul, when you think about traction and what that means to you relative to Somnia, how would you define that? And then sort of second part of the question, where are you seeing the first elements of that in sort of the early days post mainnet?
Yeah, very interesting question, because my mind has changed on this in the last few weeks. So the original position, so Somnia, as I said, very focused on the gaming and entertainment angles. And so the original kind of traction metrics that we look at and the key KPIs are user counts, so daily active wallets, monthly active wallets, and then transactions, because transactions basically shows the usage of those users of the different applications in the chain. And ultimately, the revenue model of the chain today is gas. So when you ever use the chain, you pay for a transaction with gas. That's the revenue model of the chain. So if you were to ask me a few weeks back, that would be my answer. I think now the way I'm currently seeing things change in the Web3 space, and I think this will continue, is that there's this, people call it the revenue meta, where it's now very important for a system to actually have high revenues, and then people are looking at valuing projects based on those revenues. more like traditional finance, which I think makes a lot more sense. I've always sat in the space and been like, these valuations are crazy. If you look at traditional like PE multiples of most projects, it's like, what? It makes no sense at all. Even though obviously people are speculating that in the future this will become much bigger, they're still way out of whack in my view. But I think this will start to shift over time as traditional finance gets more and more involved in the space, and you'll slowly see a re-rating of projects based on the fundamental revenue models of the systems. And so now what we're thinking about at Somnia is taking those kind of core DeFi primitives that all of these applications on top use, making them almost part of the protocol, and the revenues of those systems accruing back to Somnia itself. So I think what we will end up doing is kind of using those revenues to accrue value back. And so another success metric will be what is the revenues of all of those key DeFi protocols that all of these applications sit on top of. And that will be, I think, give Somnia a more real valuation, like with traditional financial metrics. So that would be my new one now. We have very clear targets internally for like user base and transaction counts, because that's how we've always thought. And now we're starting to add this concept of revenues from these key DeFi components as well.